5c. Find the absolute minimum value, that means absolute lowest y-coordinate of f. Absolute minimum value of f means absolute lowest y-coordinate of f for x values between 0 and 2 pi. So I remember the min-max theorem, which says to find the lowest value on f, I must study f prime. And I must identify the x-coordinates where f prime has a value of 0. By simply writing that right here, that is sufficient to earn 1 point. Now I must identify what x-coordinates cause the value of f prime to be 0. So I've got to solve this equation by identifying the x's which will make this equation, this here, equals 0. You don't solve for x in a complicated equation like this by trying to get x alone. Solve for x by factoring. So I factored an e to the x from this equation. That got me to here. Now I remember, e to the something is always positive. So this isn't going to do anything for me. I've got to figure out what will make this factor 0. That means I've got to find an x that will make the cosine exactly the same as the sine, because we're adding them together where one is negated. So I need the cosine and sine to be the same value. The only time the cosine and sine are the same value is when we are dealing with angles that involve pi over 4. Angles like these. If we are at any of these angles, oh, be careful. Actually, this one and this one. Those two angles, the sine and cosine, have values of root 2 over 2. In this case, both positive root 2 over 2. In this case, both negative root 2 over 2. Let's draw that. So we have our circle. I go to the angles of pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4. So notice that at pi over 4, from the center, the distance across is exactly the same as the distance up and down. Therefore, the cosine of pi over 4 is exactly the same thing as the sine of pi over 4. And in both cases, the cosine of pi over 4 and the sine of pi over 4 are both equal to root 2 divided by 2. That happens again here. The distance down and the distance across is the same. So that means that the cosine of 5 pi over 4 is exactly the same as the sine of 5 pi over 4. And in both cases, they are equal to a negative root 2 over 2. So these are the two times when the sine and cosine have the same value. Therefore, those are the two values of x which will cause this sum here in pink to equal 0, causing f prime to equal 0. So those are the two x values that you have to list. That will earn you another point. You don't have to show any of this work, you just have to figure it out. Okay, once I know that f prime is going to equal 0 at these two x coordinates, that earned me the second point here. Now I have to check and find what is the value of f at all the important points. So I've got to go to x equals 0 because that's the first point on the interval. I must check the value of f when x equals 2 pi. That's the last point on the interval. I must also check the value of f at pi over 4 and 5 pi over 4 because those are the x coordinates where f prime is equal to 0. Notice how important it is to mentally keep track of whether you're working with f or f prime because you do switch back and forth. We have a formula for f. So to find these four values of f, I simply use the formula for f. Take the formula, plug in x equals 0. Plug in x equal pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, etc. So I do all that. And the work is shown here. And you'll notice e to the 0 is 1. We already figured out that the cosine of 0 is also 1. So the value of f when x equals 0 is 1. If you plug in pi over 4, you get e to the pi over 4 multiplied by the cosine of pi over 4. We already figured out that the cosine of pi over 4 is root 2 over 2. We plug in 5 pi over 4. We figured out that the cosine of 5 pi over 4 is negative root 2 over 2. Now that's important. We just found a negative value for f. These were positive y-coordinates on f. We're looking for the lowest point on f, so a negative is important. F of 2 pi, we get e to the 2 pi times the cosine of 2 pi. We know that the cosine of 2 pi is 1. So there's only one of these important values of f that is negative. Therefore, that must be where f is lowest. We write that conclusion. You've got to write the value because it says, what is the absolute minimum value? You've got to write this value down. Make sure you label it. All of that blue stuff gives you one more point for a total of 3 on part 5C.